Please, act like you love me. The poor girl begged the CEO in front of her ex-boyfriend. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Today's story is titled, Please Act Like You Love Me. The poor girl begged the CEO in front of her ex-boyfriend. Now, let's get back to our main character. The rain poured hard against the windows of a small cafe on Fifth Avenue, streaking the glass like silver threads under the neon lights. Inside, the laughter and clinking glasses felt a world away from her heartbeat. Lila sat by the corner, her second-hand dress damp at the hem, her fingers trembling around a chipped coffee cup. Across the street, through the rain, she could see the glow of the Grandview Hotel, the place she swore she'd never step into again. Tonight, her ex-boyfriend Daniel was celebrating his engagement to the woman who once called Lila too plain to matter. Lila stared at her reflection in the window. Her mascara had smudged, her lipstick was fading, but none of that hurt as much as the thought of Daniel laughing in that ballroom. She blinked back tears and opened her cracked phone screen, hesitating over a name she hadn't called in months. Ethan Cole. He was a man she'd met once by accident when she spilled coffee on his suit and apologized until her voice broke. He'd only smiled and said, "Mistakes happen. Just breathe." He was calm, distant, and clearly someone far above her world. A millionaire CEO, one she never expected to speak to again. But desperation makes people brave, or foolish. Her thumb hovered over his number, heart racing. Finally she pressed call. The line rang twice. "Mr. Cole?" she whispered when he picked up, her voice barely audible over the thunder. "It's me, Lila." There was a pause, the faint sound of papers rustling. "Lila?" His tone was careful, measured. "Is everything all right?" Her breath trembled. "No, not really." Lightning flashed, illuminating her face in the window. "Please act like you love me, just for tonight." Silence. She thought he'd hang up or laugh or ask if this was a joke. Instead, his voice came low, steady, almost protective. "Where are you?" she exhaled shakily, glancing once more at the hotel across the street. "Cafe Verona, across from the Grandview." "Stay there," he said. "Don't move." The call ended. Minutes felt like hours. The rain thickened, drumming against the roof until the door suddenly swung open. He walked in tall, composed, black coat glistening with rain, the kind of presence that turned heads without trying. Ethan Cole. He scanned the room once before his gaze landed on her. For a second, she almost forgot to breathe. "You look cold," he said softly, sliding off his coat and draping it over her shoulders. It was warm, expensive, smelling faintly of cedar and rain. "Tell me why I'm pretending." She swallowed, eyes downcast. "My ex is getting engaged tonight, and I can't stand there looking small anymore." Ethan studied her face for a moment, the way her chin trembled as she tried to stay composed. Then he nodded once. "All right," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Let's make them believe." Lila blinked. "You'd really do that?" "You asked for a favor?" he replied, his gaze steady. "And I don't break promises." She felt her chest tighten with disbelief. The man every magazine called ruthless was now offering to be her shield. Outside, the rain slowed, and the city lights shimmered on the wet pavement like a stage being lit. She stood, her hand trembling slightly as he offered his arm. "Ready?" he asked. Lila hesitated only a moment before whispering, "As I'll ever be." Together, they stepped out into the night, toward the golden glow of the hotel, where the lie she begged for was about to change both their lives forever. The lobby of the Grandview Hotel glimmered under golden chandeliers, the kind of light that made everything look expensive and everyone pretend to belong. Lila did not belong, not really. Her shoes, though polished, were worn at the edges, and her heart thudded in her chest so loud she was afraid people might hear it. Ethan walked beside her, calm as stone, one hand gently resting on her back as if they had always moved together like this. His black suit fit perfectly, his presence commanding, and every eye in the room turned when he entered. Lila could feel the stares like heat against her skin. Ethan leaned slightly closer and whispered, "Breathe, Lila. You are fine. Look at me, not them." She forced a small smile, her voice barely a whisper. "I do not know how you can act like this is easy." "It is not," he replied softly. "But pretending is an art. Let us make them believe." The sound of laughter broke through the music. Lila froze. Across the room, Daniel stood in a tailored tuxedo, his arm wrapped around a tall brunette in a shimmering silver gown, his fiancée. Their eyes met. Surprise flickered across Daniel's face, quickly replaced by something sharp mocking curiosity. He started toward them, dragging his fiancée with him. Lila's stomach twisted. Ethan straightened, expression unreadable, the perfect mask of wealth and control. "Lila," Daniel said when he reached them, voice dripping with polite venom. "I did not expect to see you here. Still working at that coffee shop?" Ethan's hand tightened on her waist before she could speak. "Actually," he said smoothly, "she works with me now." Daniel blinked, his smug smile faltering. "With you?" Ethan extended his hand. "Ethan Cole." Recognition hit. Daniel's tone shifted instantly, the false charm of someone who just realized he might have insulted the wrong man. "Oh, Mr. Cole, of course. I have read about your company." Ethan smiled slightly. "Then you will know that I do not tolerate disrespect toward the people I value." He looked down at Lila with quiet affection that made her heart ache. "Especially her," murmurs rippled nearby. Daniel's fiancée looked confused. Lila could barely breathe. Every eye seemed to be on them. Ethan leaned close enough that only she could hear. "You wanted to look strong," he murmured. "Now you do." She whispered back, trembling. "They will think I used you." "Then let them," he said simply. They already thought worse before tonight. Before she could reply, a photographer appeared, snapping photos as Daniel awkwardly stepped back. Ethan smiled for the camera, still holding her hand. His grip was steady, warm, protective. The flash went off again, freezing that moment forever, a poor girl standing beside a man who looked like he owned the world. The rest of the night blurred. They danced once, slowly, for appearance's sake. The orchestra played something soft and old, and though she tried to keep her eyes down, she found herself glancing up at him. He looked distant, almost sad. "You have done this before," she said quietly. "Pretending?" He nodded faintly. "Too many times. Usually for business, not for hearts." "Then why help me?" she asked. He hesitated, eyes flicking toward the glittering crowd. "Because you asked without expecting anything in return. That is rare." For a heartbeat, silence hung between them, filled only by the sound of the violin. The world around them disappeared, just her heartbeat, his steady breathing, the faint scent of rain still clinging to his jacket. When the song ended, he leaned closer and whispered, "We should leave before someone starts asking questions." Outside, the night was colder, the city lights flickering in puddles across the street. Lila wrapped his coat tighter around her shoulders. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You did not have to come." "Maybe not," he answered, looking at her with that calm, unreadable gaze again. "But I am glad I did." For the first time all evening, she smiled without pretending. The rain had stopped, but something new had started, something she could not name yet, something that felt dangerously close to hope. The next morning, sunlight crept through the thin curtains of Lila's apartment, catching the edges of her sketchbook and the chipped mug beside her bed. She had not slept. Her phone buzzed for the 10th time. Ethan's name flashed across the screen. She hesitated, then answered. "Good morning, Miss Reyes." His voice came through, calm but warm. "Are you ready to discuss our next act?" She blinked, half convinced last night had been a dream. "Our next act?" Ethan chuckled softly. "You did not think I would walk into that room without expecting consequences, did you? The press has been calling since dawn. I told them we are seeing each other." Lila sat up straight, heart racing. "You what?" "Relax," he said smoothly. "It will help us both. You will not have to face that man again alone, and I get to avoid a few opportunistic investors who think I need a wife to appear stable. It is mutually beneficial." She could almost hear the smile in his voice. "Meet me at my office at noon. We will sign a short-term agreement." The call ended before she could reply. Noon came too quickly. The elevator to Cole Industries was lined with gold trim and quiet enough for her to hear her own breathing. When the doors opened, she stepped into a world of glass and steel, where assistants moved like clockwork. Ethan stood near the window, phone in hand, the skyline of New York stretching endlessly behind him. He turned when she entered, and for a moment, She forgot how to breathe again. "You look nervous," he said. "You make it sound like I am about to sign my life away," she replied, half joking. "Not your life," he said, walking toward her. "Just 3 weeks of it." He handed her a slim folder. Inside was a printed contract, 3 pages, clean and simple. She skimmed the lines: public appearances, scheduled dinners, no personal involvement beyond agreed events. "Clause number 3, he said, tapping the page. "No emotional entanglement." She arched an eyebrow. "That seems optimistic." Ethan smiled faintly. "It keeps things clear." She signed. Her signature looked small beneath his elegant one. When she handed the pen back, he said softly, "Welcome to the performance, Miss Reyes." That afternoon they appeared together for the first time in public. The paparazzi outside the hotel had not yet calmed from the previous night's photos, and the moment they stepped from his car, flashes erupted like fireworks. Lila clung to his arm, her smile trembling but steady. "Just pretend it is art," he murmured, waving politely to the cameras. "You are the masterpiece." Later in the car, Lila sighed, exhausted. "How do you live with all that attention?" He looked out the window. "You get used to people watching when you have nothing left to hide." His tone carried something heavy, but he did not elaborate, and she did not ask. Over the next few days, they maintained the illusion dinners, charity visits, and even a photo shoot that felt more like a dream than real life. Ethan was courteous, professional, never crossing the line of their agreement. But sometimes, when she caught him watching her from across the room, there was something unspoken in his eyes. One evening, after an event, they stopped by a small gallery downtown. Lila's gaze softened at the sight of the paintings. "You used to paint?" Ethan said quietly. She nodded. "I still do, just not for anyone to see." "Maybe you should," he replied. "The world needs honesty more than perfection." She smiled faintly. "And what about you? What do you need?" He paused, eyes on a painting of 2 figures standing in the rain. "To remember what real looks like." The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It felt like understanding. When he dropped her off that night, he lingered at her door. "Good night, Lila," he said. "Good night, Ethan," she replied, her heart unexpectedly warm. As the elevator doors closed, she realized something dangerous pretending was starting to feel real. By the end of the 2nd week, Lila had learned to smile for cameras, hold her posture through endless conversations, and hide her shaking hands beneath the tablecloths of 5-star dinners. Every evening she told herself it was temporary, just 3 weeks of pretending, but the line between the act and the feeling had begun to blur. Ethan, for his part, was consistent, polite, composed, occasionally teasing, but never crossing that invisible boundary. He treated her like a partner in a performance, not a pawn, and that made it harder to keep her heart in check. On a Wednesday night, they attended a charity gala for children's art programs. Lila wore a navy gown that Ethan's assistant had chosen, simple but elegant, and as they walked in, he whispered, "You look like you belong here." She smiled, though her voice trembled. "That is the first time anyone has said that to me." The event unfolded in a swirl of lights and laughter, yet beneath the glitter, Lila sensed a strange tension in Ethan. He was distant, distracted, his jaw tightening whenever his phone buzzed. During dinner, a man approached their table, a tall, silver-haired executive who greeted Ethan with a too familiar smirk. "Ethan Cole, still playing The Bachelor, I see. And who is this lovely companion?" Ethan's hand found hers under the table. "This is Lila Reyes, my girlfriend." The word still startled her, even after days of hearing it. The man chuckled. "A girlfriend or a press strategy? You always were good at mixing business and pleasure." Lila felt Ethan's fingers tighten slightly around hers before he let go. "Some things are not for business," Ethan said calmly, but his eyes were cold. The man left with a laugh, muttering something about Cole's charity case, just loud enough for Lila to hear. The insult burned, but before she could speak, Ethan rose from his seat and offered her his hand. "Dance with me." The orchestra played a slow tune, and as they moved together across the floor, she whispered, "You did not have to defend me." "I was not defending," he said softly, guiding her with deliberate grace. "I was reminding him that you are not to be disrespected." She looked up at him, her voice barely audible. "Why are you doing this for me, really?" His expression softened. "Because I know what it feels like to be seen as replaceable." The moment hung between them, charged and quiet. When the song ended, neither stepped away immediately. Cameras flashed. Reporters whispered. Somewhere behind them, Daniel and his fiancée had arrived, their eyes locked on the scene unfolding. Lila felt the weight of the room pressing in, the flashbulbs capturing every breath. Ethan leaned closer and murmured, "Ignore them. Just look at me." She did. For the first time, it was not an act. After the gala, the car ride was silent, the air thick with things unsaid. Lila stared out the window, the city lights blurring like watercolors. "You should not have to keep saving me," she said finally. "Maybe I am not," he replied quietly. "Maybe I am saving myself." When he dropped her off, he hesitated before she stepped out. "Tomorrow," he said, "come to my office at 8. I want to show you something." The next morning, she found herself standing in front of a half-finished canvas in his private office, an abstract painting of storms and light. Ethan stood beside it, sleeves rolled, a hint of paint on his fingers. "You paint," she said in surprise. He smiled faintly. "Not well, but it helps me remember that control is an illusion." She traced a finger near the canvas, not touching. "It is beautiful." "So are you," he said before catching himself, clearing his throat. "I mean your work, the sketches you showed me." Her heart skipped, but she only nodded. They stood there, silent, surrounded by glass and color and everything. Neither dared to say. Outside, the rain began again, gentle but steady, tapping against the windows like a secret trying to be heard. For the first time since the contract began, Lila wondered if 3 weeks would ever be enough. The following days unfolded like a dream she was afraid to wake from. The contract had 2 weeks left, yet every passing hour made the illusion feel more like truth. Ethan had grown quieter, but in that quiet there was warmth, the kind that lingered in glances and half-smiles that never made it into photos. Their public outings continued, each event building a narrative that neither dared to correct. One night, after a business dinner downtown, Ethan invited her to walk along the East River before the driver took them home. The wind was cold, but the lights across the water shimmered like scattered stars. Lila wrapped his coat tighter around herself and said, "When this is over, will you miss pretending?" Ethan paused, his gaze on the skyline. "Pretending is safer than feeling," he said softly, "but it is also lonelier." They stopped at the railing. For a long moment the world was silent except for the sound of waves slapping against the stones below. Then Ethan spoke again, his tone almost a whisper. "Lila, what would you do if you could start over?" She smiled faintly. "I would paint again. Open a small studio, maybe teach kids who cannot afford art classes. Something simple, something real." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe I can help you make that happen." Her chest tightened. "You already have helped me enough." "Not yet," he said, turning to face her fully. "Not until you believe you deserve more than just surviving." His words cut deeper than she expected. Before she could respond, a camera flash burst from the shadows behind them. "A paparazzo," shouted Ethan's name. More flashes followed. Within seconds, 2 men appeared, snapping pictures of her, shouting questions. Ethan stepped in front of her, blocking the view. "That is enough," he barked, his voice sharper than she had ever heard. The photographers scattered as his driver rushed forward, ushering them back into the car. Inside, Lila trembled, staring at the pictures already uploading online through social media. Ethan's jaw was tight. "They crossed a line," he muttered. "I will have my legal team handle this." "It is fine," she whispered, though her voice cracked. "It is not fine," he said firmly. "They called you a gold digger." She blinked, stunned. "What?" He turned his phone toward her. The headline glared in bold letters. Asterisk, "Billionaire's mystery girlfriend. Is she after his fortune?" Asterisk, Lila's breath caught. The words hit harder than she imagined. "They are right," she said quietly. "To them, I am nobody. A waitress, pretending to fit into your world." "Do not say that," Ethan said sharply. "You belong wherever you decide to stand." "You do not get it," she replied, voice trembling. "You can walk into any room and they listen. I walk in and they laugh." For once, he had no answer. The silence stretched until the car stopped in front of her building. She reached for the door handle, but his hand caught hers. "Lila," he said softly, "I am sorry. I did not mean for this to hurt you." She looked at him, tears brimming. "That is the thing about pretending, Ethan. Someone always gets hurt when it starts to feel real." She stepped out into the rain before he could speak again. The next morning, the internet was merciless. Her social media flooded with insults, old classmates digging up her past, reporters crowding near her cafe. Ethan tried calling, but she ignored every ring. He sent flowers. She returned them unopened. That night, she sat at her kitchen table, staring at the contract. Only 3 days remained. She could end it now. But before she could decide, a knock echoed at her door. When she opened it, Ethan stood there, drenched from the rain, holding a small canvas wrapped in paper. "I do not care what they say," he said, his voice rough. "But I need you to know something." He handed her the painting. She unwrapped it slowly. It was her standing by the river, eyes lifted toward the city lights. "You painted this?" she whispered. "Yes," he said quietly, "because that was the first night I stopped pretending." Her tears fell freely now, the storm outside echoing the one between them. Lila stood frozen at the door, the rain dripping from Ethan's coat forming small puddles on her floor. He looked exhausted, like he had not slept in days. The painting trembled slightly in her hands as she tried to process his words. "You stopped pretending?" she whispered. Ethan nodded, his voice low but steady. "That night by the river when you told me about your dream, I realized I was not helping you out of pity. I was doing it because you reminded me what it feels like to care again." Lila's chest ached. "Ethan, we had an agreement. No feelings, remember?" "Yes," he said quietly, stepping closer. "And I am breaking it." The rain pattered harder outside, the sound filling the silence between them. For a moment she wanted to believe him, to let go of everything and fall into the illusion that had somehow become her reality. But she shook her head, her voice trembling. "You do not know what you are saying. When this story dies down, you will go back to your world, and I will still be the girl from the calf who did not belong." Ethan's eyes softened. "You think I care about belonging? I built an empire to prove something to people who never mattered, and it still feels empty. But you make it quiet." The honesty in his voice broke her resolve. She looked at him. The man she had once seen as untouchable now standing vulnerable in her doorway. "Ethan," she whispered, "what happens when people find out this was supposed to be fake?" He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the folded contract, now damp from the rain. Without another word, he tore it in half, the paper shredding under his fingers. "Then we give them something real to talk about." Her breath caught as he let the pieces fall to the floor. For a second, she thought he might kiss her, but he did not. He simply looked at her, waiting for her to decide. Instead, she stepped back. "I need time," she said softly. "Everything feels too fast." Ethan nodded once, though she could see the disappointment in his eyes. "I will wait," he said, "as long as it takes." Then he turned and walked away, his figure disappearing into the curtain of rain. The next few days were a blur. The article about her and Ethan refused to fade. News outlets replayed photos, gossip shows speculated about her past, and social media twisted the story into a scandal. Lila returned to work at the calf, trying to fade into the background, but whispers followed her everywhere. One afternoon, while she wiped down tables, her manager handed her an envelope. Inside was a letter from an art foundation, an invitation to submit her work to a young artist's exhibit. At the bottom, written in familiar handwriting, were the words, "No more hiding, E." She smiled despite herself. Ethan had kept his promise without asking for anything in return. That night, she stayed up painting until dawn. The strokes came alive under her hand rain, light, and the shadow of a man standing by the river. It was her truth, finally visible. A week later, at the opening of the exhibit, she stood in a crowded gallery filled with murmurs and soft music. Her name printed neatly beneath her first displayed canvas made her heart swell with disbelief. She was not sure if Ethan would come, but a part of her hoped he would. And then she felt the quiet shift in the room as he walked in. He looked different, not the immaculate CEO, but just a man, simple and sincere. Their eyes met across the gallery. He smiled, that same calm, steady smile that had once steadied her heartbeat. She stepped forward, words catching in her throat. "You came," he nodded. "You invited me." "Not in words," she said softly, "but I hoped." Ethan's gaze flickered to the painting of the river. "It is beautiful," he said. "You gave me the reason to finish it," she replied. They stood there, surrounded by art and light, the noise of the world fading until only the sound of their hearts filled the silence. For the first time, nothing between them was pretend. For a while, everything felt peaceful. Lila's name began to circulate in small art circles, her work praised for its raw honesty. She had finally found her voice again, and Ethan had become a quiet part of her world, never intrusive, always supportive. They met occasionally for coffee, for gallery visits, for moments that lingered longer than either of them intended. Still, neither dared to define what they were. It was as if both feared speaking would break the fragile magic between them. One morning, while Lila was preparing new paintings for an upcoming charity auction, her phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline froze her blood. Coal Industries faces insider scandal, CEO Ethan Cole under investigation. Her heart raced as she read the article. Anonymous sources claimed that Ethan had leaked company information to manipulate stock prices. Reporters were camped outside his office, and investors were demanding explanations. It sounded wrong, too deliberate, too convenient. She called him immediately, but the line went straight to voicemail. Hours later, she saw his face on the evening news, walking through a sea of cameras, his expression calm but pale. The reporter's voice said, "Mr. Cole has refused to comment on allegations connecting him to the recent market leak." Lila felt a chill. The same people who had worshipped him now turned their backs without hesitation. The next day, she decided to go to him. His penthouse, once alive with quiet music and soft light, now felt like a fortress of silence. He opened the door himself, looking like he had aged years overnight. "You should not be here," he said, voice rough. "The press will twist this too." "I do not care," she replied, stepping inside. "Tell me what happened." Ethan rubbed a hand over his face. "Someone inside my board used my login credentials to transfer documents. They want me to take the fall because it will protect the company's image." "So you are innocent," she said firmly. "Of course I am," he said bitterly, "but proving it will take time. And time is not something shareholders have patience for." She reached out and touched his arm. "Then let me help." He looked at her, disbelief flickering in his eyes. "You have already helped more than you know. But this could destroy me. Or it could show who you really are," she said softly. "You once told me to stop hiding. Maybe now it is your turn." Ethan stared at her for a long moment before sighing. "There is something you should see." He handed her a folder containing financial records and email chains. "I have reason to believe Daniel's company is involved. He has been trying to buy out one of our subsidiaries for months." Lila's stomach dropped. "Daniel? My ex?" Ethan nodded grimly. "He knows you and I are close. If he forged anything, he could have accessed data through old event photos, your name, anything linking us." Lila's hands trembled. "So he used me to get to you. That is what I am afraid of," Ethan said quietly. "But we need proof before accusing him." Determined, she agreed to help. For the next 2 days, they went through every piece of evidence, tracing emails, checking timestamps. Late one night, Lila noticed something small but crucial. A time-stamped email sent from Ethan's account while he was speaking live at a charity gala 2 weeks ago. She looked up at him. "You could not have sent this. You were with me that night." Ethan leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. "Then whoever did this used a remote connection." They exchanged a look. Daniel's tech firm specialized in digital infrastructure. Lila's pulse quickened. "If we can prove this, you can clear your name." He smiled faintly, a glimmer of hope returning. "Then let us finish what they started." As dawn broke over the city, the two of them sat side by side, surrounded by papers and half-empty coffee cups. For the first time in days, Ethan reached for her hand and said softly, "You should not have to fight my battles." "Maybe," she whispered, squeezing his hand, "but I am not walking away this time." And as the light spilled through the window, painting gold across the floor, they both knew that whatever came next, they were in it together. 2 sleepless nights later, Ethan and Lila finally had the evidence they needed. Through archived server logs and a trace from Daniel's tech firm, they discovered the connection had been routed through a private proxy that linked directly to Daniel's office network. Lila's heart pounded as she stared at the screen. "This is it," she whispered. "This proves it was him." Ethan exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "It is not enough for public defense, but it is enough to open an internal investigation." "Then do it," she said firmly. "Clear your name." Ethan looked at her, admiration softening the exhaustion in his eyes. "You are braver than anyone I have ever met." She smiled faintly. "No, I just learned from you." They submitted the documents anonymously to the Federal Securities Board and waited. Within 48 hours, the story began to shift. A new headline appeared online. "Evidence points to rival firm in coal industries leak." It was only a matter of time before Daniel's name surfaced. But the damage to Ethan's reputation was not easy to undo. Investors still hesitated, shareholders doubted his leadership, and whispers about his reckless judgment filled every news feed. Despite the truth emerging, the world loved scandal more than redemption. One afternoon, Ethan sat in his office, staring at the city skyline while his phone buzzed relentlessly. Lila stood quietly beside him. "You can walk away now," he said, his voice low. "This is no longer your fight." She shook her head. "It stopped being just your fight the moment they dragged me into it. I will see this through." He turned to her, searching her face. "Why? After everything I have done, after all the pretending, why stay?" She met his gaze steadily. "Because pretending does not erase the truth. And I know who you really are." For a long moment he said nothing, only watched her with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. Then his phone rang again. He sighed and answered, "Yes?" It was the head of the investigation. The voice on the other end confirmed what they had hoped. Daniel's firm was officially under inquiry for corporate fraud. Ethan listened silently before saying, "Thank you." When he hung up, his eyes glistened with relief. "It is over," he said softly. Lila smiled. "No, it is just beginning." Days later, the news broke publicly. Daniel was arrested for cyber fraud, his company's shares plummeting overnight. Ethan's name was cleared, and Coal Industries stock began to recover. But the victory felt hollow compared to the quiet gratitude in his heart. He met Lila at the same cafe where everything had begun. The rain was falling again, soft and rhythmic against the windows. "Do you remember this place?" she asked, smiling. "How could I forget?" he said, glancing at the same corner table where she once sat trembling in her old dress. "You were terrified that night," he said gently, "and you still came." "So did you," she replied. "Maybe that was fate." Ethan's lips curved into a smile. "Maybe it was the best mistake either of us ever made." The waitress brought their coffee, and for a moment neither spoke. The silence was comfortable, like coming home. Then Lila reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "What is that?" he asked. "My resignation," she said softly. "From the contract that never really existed. I do not want to pretend anymore." Ethan looked down at the envelope, then back at her. "Good," he said quietly, "because neither do I." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "You once asked what happens when pretending starts to feel real," he said. "Now you know." Lila's heart swelled as she met his gaze. "So what happens next?" Ethan's smile deepened, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "Next," he said softly, "we stop running from it." The cafe door chimed as the rain eased outside, and for the first time the world around them felt still. It was not the end of their story, but the moment they both finally chose to begin it for real. The following months unfolded quietly, like the calm after a long storm. Ethan withdrew from public view for a while, focusing on rebuilding his company's trust from the ground up. Lila poured her heart into her art, her small studio slowly filling with sunlight, paint-stained canvases, and laughter from the neighborhood children she began teaching on weekends. Though their worlds were busy, they always found time to see each other coffee in the mornings, calls late at night, silent moments that said more than words ever could. The past no longer felt like a wound. It was simply part of their story. One crisp autumn morning, Lila received an invitation in the mail. The card was embossed in silver with the words, "Coal Foundation Annual Gala Honoring Local Artists." Her heart fluttered as she read the small note attached in Ethan's handwriting. "You once said art should belong to everyone. Let us make that happen together. Tonight, be there." That evening, she stood before the mirror in a soft cream gown, her nerves betraying her calm smile. When she arrived at the venue, the sight stole her breath. The gallery had transformed into a luminous exhibition featuring paintings from young, undiscovered artists. At the center of the room hung her own piece, the painting of the river, the one she had made the night after Ethan brought her that first canvas. Above it, in elegant lettering, was written, "The Art of Lila Reyes, a celebration of courage and truth." She turned slowly, eyes filling with tears as Ethan approached, dressed in a simple black suit, his expression full of quiet pride. "You did all this?" she asked, voice trembling. "We did," he corrected softly. "This foundation is not just mine anymore. It is ours." She laughed through her tears. "You cannot keep surprising me forever, Ethan." "Then I will have to try harder," he said, taking her hand gently. The music shifted, soft piano notes echoing through the hall as he led her to the center of the floor. Cameras flashed again, but this time, Lila did not shy away. She met them with her head held high, her heart light, her smile unforced. As they danced, Ethan leaned close and whispered, "Do you remember the contract you signed that first week?" She laughed. "How could I forget? 3 rules: no emotions, no attachment, and no crossing lines. He smiled. I think we broke all 3. You tore that paper up, she teased. So technically, it never existed. Then maybe it is time we sign a new one, he said, his voice warm and steady. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Lila gasped softly as he opened it. Inside was a delicate silver ring, simple yet radiant in the golden light. No clauses, no conditions, he said quietly. Just one promise that we keep choosing each other, even when it is not easy. The room fell silent as he knelt slightly, not with grandeur but sincerity. Lila Reyes, will you make this real? Her eyes glistened as she nodded. Yes, she whispered. I will. Applause erupted around them, flashes from cameras turning into sparkles of light, but neither noticed. For them, the world had shrunk to a heartbeat, the same rhythm that had carried them through every lie, every truth, every second chance. Later, standing by the river where it had all begun, they watched the reflections of the city ripple across the water. Lila leaned into his shoulder, her voice soft. Do you ever think about that night, the one where I asked you to act like you loved me? Ethan smiled, pressing a kiss to her hair. Every day, he said, because that was the moment I stopped acting. She closed her eyes, letting the cool breeze wrap around them, the sound of the city fading into a hum. What had started as a lie had turned into something neither of them could have scripted: a story of redemption, of love born from brokenness, and of 2 people who learned that the truest things in life never need to be performed. As the lights from the bridge shimmered above them, Ethan whispered the words that had once begun it all. Please, he said softly, act like you love me. Lila smiled against his chest and whispered back, I am not acting anymore.